Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guest. And we have a gentleman on the show today, and I could say he's a legend. He might not want to hear that, but he's legendary, and he has so much going on. I was just talking to his wife, and he's 81, and he's writing a book. He was doing a screening of a documentary, and he recently, a month and a half ago, they remastered the 50th anniversary of his album Song for Juli, which my good friend Steve McGrew, the Very Funny Comics, one of his favorite songs is Morning Sun, and my guest is Jesse Colin Young. How you doing, Jesse?
I'm doing good today. I just had a little walk. Boy, that writing the book is like, my watch goes off every hour and says, you got to stand up.
Yeah. What made you decide to start writing the book?
You know, I started before COVID, and and then the first day of stay at home at COVID, instead of going to work on the book, I said, well, we're not going to DinnerCon. What are we going to do? She said, this is kind of weird, so why don't you go get your guitar and play Sugar Babe? I'll take a phone video. We'll stick it up on Facebook. I bet you a lot of people, are feeling weird today. So, and then I got into that, and I got into learning to play all my music solo, most of which I'd written when I was in bands and never played solo. I just started out that way, half a century ago. And I thought, this is cool. I had a lot to learn. So we did that for a few months. And then my manager said, wow, you're doing good with these. People are responding to it. Why don't you just make a solo album? So I got totally distracted by the solo album. And the book just kind of laid there waiting. Once in a while I would say, hey, Jess, I'm over here. And so we went on a tour last summer with my daughter, Jazzy, who has put out a couple beautiful EPs and has now started to work on her first full-length album. Jazzy Young, and beautiful voice, wonderful writer, and yeah, just like my mom. She is the youngest of my children, and I was waiting for a child who would bring my mother's voice forward. And almost ran out of time, and then there she came. So it's wonderful. But this looking back stuff and then jumping into it's like I have coffee with my beautiful little pooch and my wife in the morning, and then all of a sudden I'm in 1967 and everyone's taking acid, and so I'm back in the current moment where I'm eating a vegetarian meal, and it's hopping around.
How far are you into the book right now?
Well, I'm still, where am I? I'm in Young, I made my way because the 50th of Juli was coming. That was the album that I disbanded the Youngbloods to make. And that was, I don't know whether it was in 72 or 73. It obviously came out in, if it's 50th, it obviously came out in 73 or 4. I don't know. We figured the math, but, and I came back from a little tour. I made an acoustic album for Warner Brothers. Youngbloods had their own label on Warner Brothers called Raccoon Records, and which they were so glad to have us after RCA. After we made 3 records for RCA, that they gave us our own label and let us record ourselves and or friends. I ended up recording wonderful singer-songwriter Michael Hurley in his living room. And then I started on Song for Juli. And I realized after touring with my brother-in-law and my new drummer and stuff that I just couldn't go back to the Youngbloods. we had been, running out of inspiration gradually. And then we had a lot of fun doing a couple of records of 50 songs that we grew up on. But by the end of that, I was ready for something new. And so I went to work on Song for Juli. And I thought, I've got enough money in the bank. I can make this record here in my own studio the first time. Well, it'll be the second time. The first time with full equipment. Before that album I made, we were just plugging microphones into this big 8-track machine, but you could only do it with one mic, in each track. I didn't have a board, so I mixed it somewhere else. So this was a first for me. I'm learning. I got a new band, and having a reed man, having a sax player, I think had really been so many of the songs I grew up with in the 50s, Little Richard tunes and stuff, and that were hits, always had a sax solo. And then when I heard Stan Getz play with Astrid Gilberto on the Girl from Ipanema album, I said, I want a sax player. Of course, I'm 20 years old. That will be my second voice like that. And Jim Rothermel came to me, and my buddies in the new rhythm section said, Jesse, you got to invite this guy up to play with us once. Once is all it's going to take. And that's what happened. So then all of a sudden, the band was there. The studio was there. Each day I was a little better at using it. I was doing my own engineering and kind of learning as I went. And the songs were coming. My son was born. Morning Sun is a Cheyenne, my oldest, was born that year. So, God, the blessings were just coming. The new house.
How were you writing back then? What was your writing process back then? Because you said you came from a band and now you're going solo, even though you're going to have a backward. What was your writing process? Was it just because you had so much good going on in your life that it just flew? It just came out of you?
My writing process was always solo, except for an album I made, The Perfect Stranger, where I purposely wrote tunes with Michael McDonald and Wendy Waldman and Danny O'Keefe, and just to have done it once. So Morning Sun, probably just high. I've got this little munchkin, just came along right after the new house. And Juli was 4, and then Cheyenne came. And I think I needed to connect with the earth again. I was born in New York City, in the cement, and but they sent me to camp in the Adirondacks when I was 8 or 9, and I fell in love with the woods, pine woods especially, and I carried that dream until we moved to California, Youngbloods, 1967, and we had visited the drummer's brother out in Old Lima, which is this tiny little town, it's actually just a one stop sign town, out on the coast near Point Reyes in Inverness, and we said, why would we move to another city? We can move out here, and be an hour and a quarter away from the city, and we got little kids. Why move to the city? So that was my chance. Although I didn't have the money then to build a house. It took a few years and a little good luck.
Now, Song for Juli,
mm-hmm.
50 years old. Still people, I saw you on your Facebook, you're selling autographed copies of it. You have a bunch of great merch to go with it. What made you decide to remaster it? And how does one remaster an album? Are you involved with it, or is it a heavy produced way? Or what made you, after all these years, because it's still a classic album, but now I guess because of the way people don't all listen to vinyl anymore, but what made you decide to remaster it? Just because it was 50 years old, or how did that come about?
Yeah, we. I want to take a look at it, and with my engineer Sean Guess, with all his new equipment, I thought, well, let's listen to it. I made it my first full record that I made, so there's a lot of Shure microphones on there, like the ones we used on stage, Shure 57s and 56s, because those I was kind of borrowing borrowing them from the Youngblood stash when we would come home, because we brought our own PA with us at most gigs. So they're good mics, but they're really made for stage, and they're made to control feedback. They're not made for super high fidelity, either up top or down low. So when we listened to the record, it had a little bit of a mid-rangey sound to it, because I used so many of those mics, because they were all I had. I mean, I was going along and buying things as the money came in. The money turned into a microphone or a compressor or a new reverb unit. Yeah, so we felt it was a little mid-rangey, so we lifted it in a wonderful way. You know, so the curve was kind of like this, because the very bottom and the very top were kind of missing, because so many mics, so many of the Shure 57s and 58s. So we lifted the high end and the very low end up, and kind of flattened out that natural curve from using those mics. And so it was not a monster, and I certainly didn't go back to I've always loved those mixes. I remember Danny O'Keefe, he made this wonderful album called Breezy Stories. Did you ever get to hear that?
No.
Wow. Arif Mardin produced it. Gorgeous songs. I said, Danny, this album is so beautiful. He said, yeah, but yours, he says, Song for Juli, no matter where I play it, I mean, if I play it on a cassette player, it sounds good. If I play it on my hi-fi, it sounds good. In my car, I'm sure I could take it to the pool hall and it would sound good on whatever they. So, I got lucky. I mean, it's not perfect, but the mixes really ring true to me. So I didn't even dream of going back and trying to remix it.
Well, how does it make you feel as an artist that something 50 years later, something you created, and you can tell you had a love for this. This is as you said, your first solo, you created it. How does it make you feel as an artist when you go, wow, 50 years and people still they're going to buy this? I mean, how does that make you feel as someone who created it? Is it a great feeling, or do you sit there and go, well, I love it, but I could have tweaked this? Because anyone who's artistic, we always get a little thrown off at times.
Yeah. When you mix your own records and you produce them yourself, by the time you get done with them, boy, you're done. I mean, you've heard everything 100 times. And, of course, you have the chance. I mean, the point of having your own studio for me was, well, it's not quite right, damn it. So we could either record it over, or we could do the drums over, or whatever we need to do, we could try and do, because, we were not paying $300 or $400 an hour. And we had the time, I had the time to do my best. And I'm glad people still love it. And hopefully, I mean, all of a sudden Morning Sun has 2 million streams. Just reintroducing it, kind of, and that was the first. We brought that we brought that song out first because it was the first single they released. So there's obviously some new interest in it. I mean, you don't make records just to put them in the closet. You want people to hear them. And So I'm hoping that this commemoration of it brings more people into the enjoyment of that record, because there's a lot of that was that brand new kids, brand new band. Everybody was so excited to make that record. There's a lot of that beautiful, brand new, this and that energy, not stuff, but energy. I don't think the guys who came into the band and became that band that was with me for the next 8 years, they had never been through an outfit like this where we actually had our own studio. We come off the road, we take a week off, and then we go right back into the studio. And a couple of them lived down the road. Other guys, lived a little further away, but not much. It was a wonderful family, and we went right from one record to the next, and a great time, or a creative time.
I want to ask you about the Youngbloods. When the song "Get Together" comes out, where did that come from? Where you wrote it, and then it became such a somewhat you could call an anthem for a time. When you sat down, where did that all come from? And did you think? I know writers never know what's going to happen. That it would become such a poignant song of that era.
Well, actually, I did not write it. And I think I fell in love with it one night at the Cafe A Go-Go. We were playing there as an opening band for whoever was headlining. And we did it very cheaply because we could have the stage all day to rehearse on. I had just become the bass player maybe 2 months before that because we couldn't find one. And we had 3 guitar players. And I saw McCartney saying, he's doing it. It can be done, so I'm going to do it. We can't find a bass player. Here I go. So I was hoping when I went down that Sunday into the Go-Go, I thought it was going to be dark. And I would say, it's dark. I'd call the band. We'd rehearse. But it was not dark. I said, oh, it's an open mic. And normally I would have turned around and gone back to my house and worked on my bass playing. But for some reason, I would call it fate. Get Together and I were fated to meet that day. And I walked down the stairs, second flight, and through the beaded curtain. And Buzzy Lenhart, a singer-songwriter from Cleveland, who was in the Village at that time, he was on stage singing Get Together. And for those 3 or 4 minutes that I listened, I really went into kind of an altered state because I could tell my life was going to change dramatically, and that this song was the key to my future, and that I had just walked into it. So I ran up to Buzzy when he came off stage, got the lyrics, went home, worked on it on the guitar, worked on it on the bass, went back and forth, took it in to the band the next day. I fell deeply in love with that song. And I could talk about it because I didn't write it. I mean, I can say these are some of the most poignant lyrics in the world without feeling like I'm blowing my own horn, because I discovered it like everyone else, and it blew me away.
Now, I had heard a story, and I want to hear it from you, because I grew up, watching The Tonight Show. And when my parents would let me stay up, because I love the comedians. I ended up having a career as a comic, but I remember seeing them, and I was enthralled. But now you guys refused to play The Tonight Show, right?
Well, we walked off.
Right. So tell me what happened.
Yeah, I was just writing about it today. Because Johnny lied about it when he came on the air, and So we got the call. They must have had a cancellation because they called us in California and it's taped in New York, and they said, "Can you, it must have been Monday, and can you come Thursday and play the show?" So we happened to be open, and our manager said, "Well, they're out there promoting Elephant Mountain, which is their new album on RCA. As long as they can play Sunlight, then they'll play Get Together." And they said, whoever it was said, that will be fine. So we bought tickets. We flew to New York. We just had a verbal agreement because there was no time in those. There was no internet. This was 1969. So we got there. We had a sound check. It was a little difficult there. And of course, in TV stations, they don't run their monitors as loud as they do, for live stuff. So that was a little bit hard. We were so used to playing live, the monitors were kind of underpowered. But we worked our way through that and played through Sunlight and then Get Together. And then we came off the stage, and whoever it was, obviously he wasn't the stage manager. He was probably the production manager or I don't know what they call these guys. But he was in charge, and he said, "We won't have time for the other song. We'll just have time for Get Together." So our manager said, "Well, we have a verbal agreement." I talked to Harry or Louis or whoever it was that he talked to on the phone and told them the deal was they play a song from their new album, they play Get Together. And he said, "Not going to happen." So we kind of looked at each other, and we thought about it, and we went in the dressing room, talked about it. It was one of those things that reveals the way the business end felt about treating musicians, where they were really it's kind of a means to an end, and should be, the profits should be shared with, kind of like today, which is even worse. The streaming, what little money there is in it for the musicians. Unless they get gazillions of streams, it's. So we said, we gave them our word. We wanted to be treated like the businessmen that we were. We were good for our word. We said we'd come. They didn't send us any money. We came. We spent, whatever thousands of dollars it took to get us there and our stuff. And we showed up ready to play, did the sound check. In other words, and we're ready to do the show. But we were not ready to be lied to, or we were not ready to renegotiate the deal. We'd come a long way, and kind of, in some ways, it was like we were doing them a favor by jumping out of. We just breathed our lives and said, "Yeah, it's a great opportunity. Thanks, we're coming." But it took a lot of musicians over this. I look at Taylor Swift and I see hundreds of us from the 60s on, thousands of us probably, working to demand respect, and when no respect was there, to find a way around, instead of having to work for people who had no respect for you, finding ways to work around that, as she has so brilliantly. And just cut him out. So we certainly couldn't do anything about that, but we could say no. We could say, we gave you our word, and you gave us yours. And we have lived up to ours. We expect you to live up to yours. So Johnny never even, he was probably on his way to the studio when this all went down. But my mother was watching that night. I said to him in the book today, Johnny, you lied to my mother. You don't get away with that. So I said, here's the story, folks.
What did he say? What did he say why you guys didn't show up? Did he have an excuse or what happened?
Huh?
What did Johnny say?
He said, well, they came in, those Youngbloods came in. They thought our set was a little corny and they didn't like the monitors. So since they were only in show business for 2 minutes, we wiped their noses and sent them home. And as I said in the book, you don't get to lie to my mother. You did it once. And that really, I can't imagine she waited through the whole show and then she hears this about her son. So
now,
I said, so disappointing from a man with so much talent. You didn't need to step into those lies and defend, because you weren't even there. Why would you badmouth us without knowing what went on or being there? And he just did it because he could. And that's abusing his very great power.
It is. Now I want to ask you, what made you pick up the guitar? I know, because what age did you start? Because I see behind you have all these nice guitars, but what made you pick up the guitar?
Well, I tried drums. I never could get a hold of a drum set, and that's probably... but I practiced a lot with a practice pad when I was 14 or 15, and then I played the piano when I was a kid, maybe from 8 to 11 or something like that, but it was really boring stuff. And as soon as rock and roll came on the radio, for me, I was 10. Alan Freed came on the radio in New York, and then I discovered Symphony Sid down at the other end of the dial, and I had these two guys, and of course all the other jocks on those shows. And I found out I'm 10 years old. I got a radio on my headboard of my bed, and if I turn it down far enough, I can leave it on all night. My parents can't even hear it. So I think for the first 4 years that Freed was on the air, my radio was on all night. That stuff, whether I was awake or asleep, I was absorbing all the beautiful rhythm and blues and doo-wop and stuff that was coming out of my radio. And so when they offered me a chance to play the guitar, I went away to prep school. We moved from New York to Pennsylvania, and the school was not as advanced, the high school. So, and my dad saw that I was losing interest, and so he got his brother to help him get me into a very fine school, Phillips Andover, and they offered the guitar, classical guitar supposedly, and I thought, oh yeah, this is it. And of course, when I took it back to the dorm, I was not doing my homework. I was listening to the Everly Brothers and Richie Valens and everything that was coming off and trying to figure out what key is that and what chord is that and what I gotta get a chord book. And yeah, from then it was a hot love affair, and I mean it still is. Now,
I saw you had a screening and some Q&A on High on a Ridgetop. It's a documentary. Tell me about that. Tell me about that project.
This is a mystery movie. It was filmed by a man named Hiro Narita, who went on to become a famous Hollywood videographer. Did you ever see that movie, Never Cry Wolf? He got tons of awards for that one. I mean, he has 40 or 50 movies on over his lifetime, and he's my exact age, born in the same year. I have never seen him since, except we got there and Connie had located him and called him up, found out he was living in Marin, well, in Sonoma, where we were staying. So our publicist had said, this is really kind of a good movie. This is well done. Who is this guy? I said, I don't know. He was just some guy. I thought he was wonderful to work with or I wouldn't have let him in my house. I don't even know how he got into my house. I mean, not that I had security guys, but neither of us remembered. I said, Hero, who brought you who started the movie? Here we are, 50 years later. We're about to see the movie for the first time together at the Arts Center on Haight Street. This is like 2 weeks ago. And he said, a man who turned out to be a schizophrenic person, impersonator, came into my office, said he was a movie producer, and said he wanted to do a movie about you. And he hired me for that, and he, was paying me. And then somehow one of my friends made some calls about him and located his mother and found out that he was using his mother's money and that he was not a movie producer. But the movie Hero had started coming to my house. And so here's a guy who's been everywhere in my house except the bathroom, photographed everything. So kind of intimately, and I have no idea. Nobody brought him in and said, this is Hero and we're going to make a movie about you. It just happened. And he has that kind of, have you ever worked with a videographer or a photographer who knows how to kind of just like disappear? Or you're conscious of them and it's making you self-conscious,
right?
And then all of a sudden that's not happening anymore. Hero somehow came into our house and I said, Hero, who directed this movie? He said, you did. They told me just do whatever Jesse, whatever he wants to do that, unless it's illegal. And I said, well, yeah, but I don't remember that much. I think you directed it with the camera.
Well, what's it about? What's the movie about?
It is about that time of the beginning of Song for Juli. And the members in the band are kind of changing as the movie goes on because I've got two guys that become part of that band and then two other guys. And then by the end of it, the band's together and we're all there. And Jim has joined us, the Reed man. In the beginning, he wasn't there. So that time I spent probably 9 months making Song for Juli. I spent my own money on it. I didn't want to sign with a record company until I had made a record with this new sound, and I wanted a record company that was really into it. So I wanted to make it first and then be able to take it to them and say, here's my work. Would you like to sign me for 5 records? Or first guy I took it to was David Geffen, and David did not want to sign me, I think. He said, there's no hits on here, Jesse. I said, and you use cheap echo. And I said, David, that was all I could afford. I mean, I put this thing together piece by piece. Warner Brothers loved it, and I ended up with them. But I had already worked with them with the Youngbloods, with Raccoon, so I felt comfortable there. But I wanted to see what other people thought about it. So, but Warner Brothers, they were just 100% behind me. You want to produce yourself, record yourself, engineer your own record? What are you, nuts? Yeah, okay, here's some money, go do it.
So the movie follows all that?
Mm-hmm. So the movie's got Cheyenne, the little 1-year-old Cheyenne, 4-year-old Juli, my wife and I, and all the different guys in the band. And it's in between the house. We're waking up or having coffee, and then all of a sudden we're in the studio, which is exactly where, it was 50 feet from my house. This is what I wanted. This was my dream, to be able to just wake up and go work on music, and listen to the takes from the night before and call up and order a microphone and get some information that I didn't have. Yeah, so it just covers that period and ends up at some wonderful with T-Bone Shuffle and some wild, a field of hippies dancing, but a small field, but just going crazy and having fun. It's beautiful.
Now,
but the songs, almost all the songs from the Song for Juli album are in there, and they're in there in their full. Well, most of them. Some of them fade, but there's a beautiful long sequence in Ridgetop of me riding my Triumph motorcycle across the top of Mount Tamalpais with all these gorgeous views and that music. Actually, the ranger station on the top of Mount Tamalpais, which is in Marin, asked me, "Can we play this at the station?" I said, "That's fine with me, man. Go play it. You're living it. You're right on top of the biggest ridge we got."
Now, you've had a great career. Tell me, because we have to wrap up soon. Tell me a good story. When you recollect on your career, tell me a good story that you sit there and go, "Oh my God, this is something I can't believe happened to me." It could be something you might put in your book, whatever.
Yes, I've been putting all kinds of things in the book, and I'm drawing a blank here. Let me push my mind back into the.
Well, here's something else. Tell me a high point of your career. When you look back, what's been a high point of your career that you feel very proud of?
The CSNY tour. We came off Song for Juli. We made a second album for Warner Brothers, Lightshine. And then, all of a sudden, I had an offer to play the whole summer tour with CSNY and open every show. And I said, "Where did this come from?" And my road manager, Patty Mayfield, said, "I heard from Bill Graham that David Crosby took your Song for Juli record on a crossing from Hawaii to Tahiti on a sailboat and fell in love with the music, and he put you forward as an idea for the opening of their summer tour." Now, I never asked Crosby if that was true, and I never asked Bill Graham if it was true. I was, he may have been involved in it. He was really excited to see me having another career on top of the Youngbloods. Youngbloods was he was our promoter many times, but there was not enough groove in the Youngbloods for him. Santana was much more up his alley, so he was glad to see me with a kind of a funkier sound and having another career. But he wouldn't have. He might have put in a good word for me, but he wouldn't have controlled that. You got those four guys. So that tour was amazing. To sing in front of that many people, night after night. We drove the whole tour. Everybody drove the whole tour. Or the equipment and me, we drove. And I think Neil drove in his motorhome. The rest of the guys were, it turns out we're having kind of a cocaine fantasy tour and staying in 5-star hotels and with 4 televisions on watching them. And the Nixon, the whole thing going down with Nixon, the Watergate hearings. And by the time we got to New Jersey, on the night Nixon resigned, we were playing somewhere in Jersey, some big stadium. And I was backstage, and I heard this tremendous roar, and it was the announcement being made. And I didn't hear the announcement. I just heard the roar. I said, I kind of rushed out of the dressing room and said, what happened? Nixon resigned. Yeah. And the crowd went crazy. And it felt so validating for those of us who knew in our hearts what a crook he was, and that, yes, we were actually going to get rid of him.
That was awesome. I know you have another interview coming up. I want to thank you so much for coming on, Jesse. People, you got to go to his website, jessecolinyoung.com. Go buy the Song for Juli album. You can get merchandise from the album. Go to his website. Get the remastered. Go listen to it. Buy it. Don't borrow it. Buy it. And people, go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 975 episodes there. Email me at coopertalk.net. Twitter, I'm at CooperTalk. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you guys next time.